So when it comes to fulfilling the Great Commission, it's important to understand what does it look like to build a discipleship culture. If we're called to obey this Great Commission and make disciples who make disciples, how do we build a culture in which disciples making disciples is normative and leaders are those that are embodying the kind of lifestyle that we want to duplicate throughout the entire culture? These three social sets represent some research by some sociologists that have discovered these kinds of ways of building culture in different sort of organizations and organisms. And so we're going to look at these and then see where we see this in the life of Jesus, which one of these is representative of the way that he modeled building a discipleship culture. So the fuzzy set. So in the fuzzy set, we see people that are connected around some sort of common cause, but nothing that really fully ties them together in terms of their direction and their movement towards that cause. I think a great example of this oftentimes happens politically as movements begin to arise. You could think all the way back to 2008 in the United States, if you are American, and you remember that there was a stock market crash and there was all of this blowback against big business and the Wall Street. And so there rose up this movement called the Occupy Wall Street movement, and people began to physically occupy the space of Wall Street. Now, if you went to sit down and talk with those folks, you might find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and more, 6, 10 different answers to why they are gathered and how they're going to move forward together. The only thing that's binding them together is this desire to see something change, but in terms of how to get there and any organization, completely lacking. So it is fuzzy, the culture that's holding them together, but there's some sort of cohesion around some sort of cause. This doesn't have a whole lot of potential for actually growing or making an impact. Then we have the bounded set. This is obviously a lot more organizational with an edge to that culture. The edge in this culture is asking the question, are you in or are you out? The question is, do you agree or you disagree? And the dynamic between the people involved tends to be more of a parent-child kind of relationship. What holds together a culture like this is a common way of thinking or a set of beliefs. So within the church, this is the attractional church. This is the organizational church. And the question is, are you in? Are you out? Do you agree? Do you disagree? And if you are in, if you are considered a part of it, but you don't yet agree, you tend to put on a religious happy face. You tend to put on this false exterior, and you try to make it look like you're a part of the group, even though you might have questions. There's no space for you to actually process through those questions. Within the life of Jesus and the early church, we see this obviously represented in the Pharisees. There is no room for growth or transformation. Everything is about the surface. Everything is about what you can see. And so it's this hypocrisy in which you either look the part and you say you agree, or you're outside and you disagree. Finally, we have the centered set. And here at the middle of this kind of culture is a set of values, things that we commit to together and then begin to live out together. And so you begin to see there's movement happening, and some who are even close to those values initially are beginning to move away from embodying and incarnating those values, and others who seem to be far off have space to move towards embodying those values, even if they don't yet fully agree with everybody involved. This dashed line shows that there is some level of basic buy-in to a set of beliefs. In Christianity, we have some basic essential doctrines that separate Christianity from cultism. And so those who are going to be given an opportunity for leadership are going to begin to have some basic agreement with some central ways of thinking. But even this person out here can be celebrated in their obedience and embodiment of the values as they move towards the center along with others along the path. It means that leadership is no longer about those who have it all together or have all the knowledge, but instead a leader is someone who's embodying the values and moving towards the center together. In other words, a centered set is about direction. The question is, which way are you headed? Are you headed towards the center, the core values of the community, the culture? Or are you heading away from them? A centered set church must have a very clear set of beliefs rooted in Christ and his teaching. And that belief system is non-negotiable and strongly held to by the community and those closest to its center. But there's still space for those who are still learning and understanding what this community is about to be on a journey of agreeing with the core beliefs of the community. Obviously, this way of doing church is very messy, and it looks like allowing people to be in process. So where do we see this in the life of Jesus? Well, in Mark chapter 3, we see Jesus having had a crowd following him around. He begins to call out a people from the crowd, and he identifies leaders. He could have identified those who had it all together, who knew the law in a perfect way, but instead he begins to call out from the crowd those who are embodying a movement towards the values that he's been demonstrating, modeling, and assisting them in living out. Jesus shows that he is all about a centered set way of living and a centered set way of building culture, that there is space for embodying the values, and leaders are defined not by those who have it all together, but instead by those who are living out the ways that Jesus models a lifestyle to them. So the early church had to deal with this question of what kind of discipleship culture are we going to build? As the Gentiles began to come in, and there was question around this topic of circumcision, which was a Jewish ritual, a part of what it meant to be inside this circle as a part of what it meant to be Jewish. Are they going to adhere to that as a part of what it means to be disciples, or is that not a part of this centered set of values? That was the question they kind of had to answer. In Acts 15, we find this being the result. It said, "It is my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God. Instead, we should write to them, telling them to abstain from food polluted by idols, from sexual immorality, from the meat of strangled animals, and from blood. For the law of Moses has been preached in every city from the earliest times, and it is read in the synagogues on every Sabbath." So they created an edge to what it meant to be practicing faith with them based on heart issues, but they said, we're not going to call this ritual practice that has been passed down in Judaism to be the edge of what it means to be in or out. Instead, it will purely be about those who embody the lifestyle of the gospel. So this is helpful because it says that if we want to build a discipleship culture, we need to look to those who are embodying it and begin to champion and celebrate leaders who are living it out, and not simply those who have all the knowledge or say the right answers or even have got to seem to have their life together according to whatever we define as successful in our culture. If that's America, then looking middle class or in a certain put together way does not define what it means to embody this culture. Instead, it's about who's moving towards the values. It means that people from whatever class, background, ethnicity, all have a place in this kingdom, and the playing field is leveled by those who are, in fact, embodying the kingdom that we're called to live out and represent.